This video is inspired by an article I found on Twitter, which people responded with so much hate, but it's about Amy Winehouse's eating disorder and its role on her death. Although seeing thin models in media does not cause eating disorders, disordered eating is so normalised in our culture, especially in celebrity culture. Few people actually acknowledge that it's not healthy and it's very potentially fatal. Amy Winehouse learnt our violent rules of what it is to be a woman very early. Footage from Asif Kapadia's documentary Amy. Amy reveals that as a teenager she thought of herself as fat. During a voiceover in a scene, Amy's mum, Janice Winehouse, describes the moment a young Amy Winehouse tells her mum about discovering a great new diet, eating then purging, which allows her to eat without gaining weight. She said that she ignored Amy's statement that she basically had bulimia and forgot about it. She thought it was some silly teenage girl phase that she would soon grow out of. Amy's mum said that Amy told her dad as well, Mitchell Winehouse, and he also dismissed it. As much as I love the documentary, they had the raw footage but no commentary on her eating disorder. Her struggles with alcohol and drug addictions were so well documented, but the tiny little fact of her severe, untreated, decade-long eating disorder was rarely mentioned. That segment transitions into an interview with someone working at the studio whilst Amy was recording Back to Black. I'm going to add a little trigger warning for this part because there's some kind of grim behaviour mention. They recount that Amy ate a large meal, so she binged, disappeared for 45 minutes, and returned with smeared makeup. When she came back, they checked the bathroom afterwards, which revealed that Amy had redecorated the bathroom, having vomited up what she just ate. The person working in the studio with her said there was a point where others working with her in the recording of Back to Black realised there was something really wrong. Then the film transitions away from any serious discussion of her eating disorder and never returns, other than in passing mentions maybe 3 or 4 times. This disease is treated as incidental and almost something permanent and untreatable. Eating disorders for the most part are easily managed means of completely ruining oneself. A person with bulimia nervosa can carry on binging and purging whilst otherwise maintaining a high level of functionality. The same goes for anorexia nervosa and lots of other eating disorders. When Amy survives her first overdose, a close acquaintance summarises the advices of a doctor and those around her to explain that the petite young girl cannot maintain the level of drug and alcohol abuse that led to the overdose. However, we've seen the footage. Amy wasn't always petite and most likely wasn't referred to that way even the time she got signed a record deal. Early videos of her performing when she was 18 to 19 years old shows that she was an average-sized woman. Her petiteness was not natural, it was fought for. But to anyone other than Amy, it was easy to overlook and intimidating to address. An interview with her brother, Alex Winehouse, in The Guardian confirms the known but not discussed quality of Amy's bulimia. He says, "We all knew she was doing it. It was almost impossible to tackle, especially if you're not talking about it. It's a real dark issue." He also states Amy Winehouse was killed by bulimia, not drugs. He told The Observer that his sister's long battle with bulimia left her weaker and more susceptible. He added that she would have died eventually, but the way she was going, what really killed her was bulimia. She suffered from bulimia very badly. At first she was influenced by her peers, they were all doing it. Amy Winehouse's eating disorder wasn't simply yet another bad decision, as you don't decide to have an eating disorder. The environmental and genetic factors that play in Amy Winehouse's childhood and adolescence put her at an extremely high risk for developing an eating disorder. Plus, the lack of early intervention, education and stable guidance meant that the disease was able to firmly take root and flourish as she was put in a higher and higher stress situation under the eye of literally the world. Depression is the most common mood disorder to be comorbidly diagnosed with an eating disorder. She used her behaviours as a way to cope with her depression. In one interview shown in the film, Amy spoke with depth and understanding on the subject as depression as a disease. She said, "As a child, I don't think I knew what depression was. I knew I felt funny sometimes and I was different." As she grew older, she began taking antidepressants. Her understanding clearly deepened. In the interview, she rejects the notion that there's something wrong with someone who suffers with depression. She says, "I'm not like some kind of messed up person, you know. There's a lot of people that suffer with depression that don't have an outlet. Environmental factors such as an unstable home life marked by an often absent father and mother who admits that it was a struggle to say no to our daughter, most likely played a role in Amy Winehouse's eating disorder. According to the National Eating Disorder Association, research suggests that nearly 50% of individuals with an eating disorder are also abusing drugs or alcohol, 5 times greater than what is seen in the general population. Eating disorders and substance abuse can be relied on for avoidance-based coping. Amy's had many visits to treatment centres and her many attempts to recover from drug and alcohol abuse, but they never seemed to address the comorbid eating disorder, despite the fact it was devastating to her health and it was the disease she had been suffering from for the longest amount of time. No one in the film considers, mentions, or maybe even has a real understanding that she could drop dead because of the severity of her eating disorder. It's a silent form of destruction, and so it is, tragically, often not considered a disease worth treating. In early videos, we see Amy belittling her appearance and hiding from the camera. She is still a huge personality, but when she's applying the makeup, she criticises her face. She's in her late teen in these videos, and those familiar with the signs will see on her face the swollen salivary glands of someone who repeatedly self-induces vomiting. In one interview, Amy Winehouse's former bodyguard describes how close they were. She used to tell him things someone might tell a parent about, like worries such as how she no longer gets her period, and secrets like the fact she will never be able to have children. The absence of menstruation and infertility are both symptoms of severe eating disorders. Amenorrhea, in particular, is used as a factor to diagnose anorexia nervosa, not so often bulimia nervosa, as the two diseases share similar symptoms, including the loss of menstruational period. But this is not a diagnostic criteria for bulimia. The reason being, people with bulimia are rarely severely underweight like Amy was. One article in the Daily Mail, of course, contains photographs of Amy and St. Luca looking really bloated, which can accompany severe cases of eating disorders due to malnutrition and internal injury. In some photographs she is eating, and one caption reads, "A healthy appetite, Amy Winehouse looks well on the way to recovering her curves on a holiday on a Caribbean island." This article includes quotes from a man Amy was seeing at the time, which indicate a very limited diet and extreme malnutrition, along besides occasions of binging and purging. This part's quite gory, and so here's a little trigger warning. The man she was seeing writes, "She lived off crunchy bars up to 10 at a time, packets of Haribo sweets and bottles of orange Lucozade. She would have a massive McDonald's, then throw it all up in the bathroom. I found my toothbrush covered in sick." The inclusion of the details in this article reveal how morbidly fascinated our society is with gory details of eating disorders and how completely misinformed we are about the facts about them. She started these behaviours when she was just a teenager and was not discouraged when she revealed her eating disorder to her parents, and continued these behaviours into adulthood that demanded a very specific body type, which would be picked apart by literally billions of witnesses. Eating disorders are very hard to handle, they're extremely difficult to treat, have high rates of relapse, and are often invisible and rarely a challenge on a sufferer's ability to carry on a normal life, and are often kept a secret, have causes and effects that are consistently misunderstood, and are rarely mentioned as an actual cause of death. Amy Winehouse's official cause of death was alcohol poisoning, but a doctor interviewed in the film describes Amy's death as a combination of alcohol poisoning and the weakened state of her body due to her eating disorder. But that assertion never made it into the official cause of death statement released into the public after her passing. The impact of such technically accurate but incomplete reporting is that the general population is not conditioned to perceive eating disorders as deadly. Had Amy's cause of death included the phrase "complications from bulimia," the world would hopefully begin to engage in some very different, more complete conversations about health. After Amy's death, the family set up a foundation in her name to curb misuse, drug and alcohol abuse by young people. The Amy Winehouse Foundation is run by her brother Alex and her dad Mitch. The charity recently donated $45,000 to Beat. Naomi Perry is one of Amy Winehouse's closest friends, and she talked about Amy and how she tried to save her from bulimia. She also partnered with eating disorder charity Beat. Amy's brother Alex Winehouse says, "We need to support eating disorder charities because no one talks about it. The situation in this country is that about 5 or 6 years ago, there was around 10 to 15 eating disorder charities out there. Now there's only 3. The unwillingness to truly regard Amy Winehouse's eating disorder shows that we still have a long way to go."